Hey, everybody. Welcome to our next guest speaker for MKT 355 Sports Selling and Sales. I'm excited to have Steve Fanelli, who is the VP of Sales and Business Operations with Athletics Baseball, join us today. Um, Steve is a veteran of Major League Baseball, huge Eagles fan, and originally from the Philadelphia area, and known for a long time. And I'm really just excited to have him join us today to tell you just a little bit about what's going on with, if you're following athletics and this relocation and new stadium and all of that is involved in that process. But then also just tell you a little bit about, the world of sales and what it's like to work in ticketing and in sales. And so please welcome Steve.
Thanks, JP. Appreciate it. Um, First off, this group here, can you give me a little bit of background on what you guys are, is this the class, what type of class this is for and what you guys are focused on, and this undergrad or
Yep.
master's
Yeah.
program?
So it's an undergrad. It's a required course for our sports marketing majors, and it's a sports selling and sales class. So we primarily, and the way I kind of designed this course, Steve, um, we first sort of get into ticket ops just to give them sort of a foundation of sort of ticketing and what that means. And then we start to push into sales. So we're just starting sort of this process of going through like, the basic sales process of what you go through in a ticket sales department. And we pair that with um, everybody is and should be actively selling right now for the Flyers. So the Flyers release like this collegiate sales program. So we have live inventory that we're working on and selling to get them real hands-on experience. And then towards the end of the semester, we'll start to push on a little bit of sponsorship sales.
Perfect.
So I give them some experience on what it's like and the differences between, ticket sales versus sponsorship. So
Yeah.
it's kind of, in some ways, it's kind of a broad course, but in other ways, I really want the students just to get an understanding of what it's like to work in sports sales. Because look, you and I both know the reality is that if you want to work in sports, at some point you're going to have to be willing to get involved in sales, and for most people it happens, in that first entry level position.
Yeah, no, okay, that's great context. So let's talk about the selling in sports then to start with. So my career started 25 plus years ago in ticketing. And obviously, you guys know this. You've probably heard this 1,000 times. The easiest way to get into an organization is first, you got to know somebody, you got to have a strong network, luck, but then you also have to be willing to step in and sell or do something where it's a little uncomfortable for some, and you have to differentiate yourself and, and get into something that is the thing about sales, especially ticketing. It's a numbers game. There's more folks in the full-time staff that sell or particularly sell tickets than any other role. So your odds are just naturally better than saying, hey, I want to step in and I want to be the baseball ops analyst, or I want to be the social media coordinator. Like those jobs are literally one of one or two of two, whereas the sales team is massive. So, but the thing with sales, it's really interesting. As I went through my career, I spent 20 years with the A's, and it's weird for you not to say Oakland, just the Athletics or Athletics baseball. But I went through 20 years with the A's, um, went to the San Francisco Giants for a few years in more of a strategy business development role, and then came back to the A's to help us with this project of moving and at this point now relocating the franchise and building a new ballpark in Las Vegas. So I started in the ticket office. It was pretty much just almost timing and luck for me at that stage. I graduated from the University of Kansas, moved back to the Bay Area where my family was living at the time, and the Raiders had moved from Los Angeles up to Oakland. And it was one of those situations where I knew that they needed help. I put on a sports coat and went into the office and just said, hey, you guys are probably looking for help. How can I help? And sat down and started working for $10 an hour doing sales calls. Didn't have any real background in sales, but I knew like, hey, this is my one shot and opportunity. I better figure this stuff out quick. And so I just jumped in and started at the next step, became the manager, the sales manager there, and then eventually transitioned over to the A's in an operations role. Today, my role is overseeing sponsorship, ticketing, merchandise, our concessions business, new ballpark design. I'm sitting here now in our ballpark in Mesa for spring training. I oversee the operations here. What's gotten me to the position that I'm in is the ability to communicate, sell, interact with people. Like, you have to sell daily, not just have someone pick up the phone and sell them a ticket. That is the basics of what you have to do. We have a meeting today with the city of Mesa on doing multi-million-dollar renovation to this building. I'm going to have to sell why we need that renovation to the building. Our ownership group is going to have to potentially invest capital into this renovation of the building. I'm going to have to sell them on why we need that capital from ownership to invest in the building. So sales, if it's in your background and your DNA, and you also have a strong ability to do it, it's going to be a necessary skill that you take from day one and through my entire career. And those that are not into selling or don't have that natural ability, it just becomes a little more difficult. So that's the first thing I'd say to this group, is that what you're doing now, setting your foundation, getting in exposure, even if it's, selling inventory for the Flyers, just having the conversation and letting the anxiety go on, like, okay, I'm gonna talk to someone now. I'm gonna have to ask for the sale, or I'm gonna have to try to push a product. If that becomes second nature to you and natural, you're on a great path. So it's just about repetition, finding your individual style, and having the opportunity to do it. I think one of the hardest things about breaking into this is getting the opportunity to do it. It's ultra competitive. I have a number of these conversations. I have two boys that are both in college. One of them aspires to work in sports. He's a college baseball player. One that has no interest in sports at all. He's an engineer. But my one son is, who's in almost the same boat that you guys are in. It's, constant coaching. But the one thing that I would preach to him, the same thing that I'll say to you all, is that you need to be aggressive at this stage in building your individual networks. You need to focus on your skill set, your sale. You have to have a logo by your name on your LinkedIn. You have to have a conversation, or to spark a conversation. Noah mentioned it, or is it Noah or Brendan? One of you guys are working for the Phillies doing part-time stuff. Yeah, it's like, just do whatever you can to get that logo on your LinkedIn so you can have that conversation and maybe differentiate yourself out a little bit. The class that you guys are working on now, and the ability to do live sales for the Flyers, it's invaluable for you to just take that next conversation and start to push yourself through that funnel, where you have that, like, if we put a job out, there's hundreds of people that are interested. How do you just narrow that down and cut that number into more of a manageable number for our sales leadership to hire that one full-time role? And it's people that have the education, doing what you're doing, the experience of working for a club, and the ability to demonstrate that they are willing to grow and do whatever it takes to get a job done. But it's also a lot of who you know. And so your network, I think, and this is what I'll say to my son, I'll say it to you guys, the network that you build is going to be the most valuable thing that you could possibly have as you enter into your next stage, from graduating into hopefully fulfilling, if it's your dream to work in sports, that'll be what drives you into that industry. It's such a competitive group that it's all about who you know.
That's great. Yeah.
We take how's it work, JP? Fire questions, or we take questions?
Yeah, I can help sort of moderate some conversation, and then we'll open up for some questions. Steve, the one question I wanted to at least address with the group here is, what's it like to sell, for example, Oakland A's baseball, knowing that you're going to be leaving, I guess I asked that question to preface it because a few weeks ago we had someone in ticket sales from the Mets, and we were talking about signing a big free agent like Juan Soto, going on a playoff run, how that winning affects everything. But I think the interesting part would be what's the opposite? How are you selling? What's your strategy when you don't have a maybe a winning season, or you're knowing that the situation's sort of it could be a little bit of a touchy situation.
I mean, the last couple of years for us, as we were trying to figure out where we were going to go and how this was all going to unfold, look, we knew we needed a new ballpark. We're playing in a 56-year-old facility that we were a tenant. Um, we put a lot of money into the facility, even though it's like, I don't know, you guys are probably all renting. You don't, you go in and renovate your apartment or whatever. Like that's essentially what we were doing at the Coliseum. And it finally got to the point where we were done with that and we needed a new building to be built. So that what goes around along with relocating a franchise, there's a lot of emotions obviously around it, and everyone has opinions, and public perception starts to spiral out of control. Sports are very emotional, fans are very emotional. While we weren't able to historically fill that ballpark nightly, um, there was a good core group of passionate fans that went to games there, and so it was always going to be hard for us to make that pivot. The staff that made the day-to-day sales, um, those folks had not only, they were all in on their careers and putting themselves in a position to do something that's more difficult. I remember, I think talked to a guy that way back when the Heat signed LeBron James from the Cavaliers for the first time, like that sales team made, I don't know how much they each made and sold over like a 2-week period, but enough for some of those folks to probably not work for a couple of years. And it was just the luck of how that all played out. That's great, but you also want to demonstrate as you continue to push forward in your career that you've had some situations where there was some level of adversity. And so that adversity that these folks on the sales team had to deal with on the day to day, it really helped them grow, practice their style, create different styles, and really be as nimble and flexible as they can with their sales. At the end of it, they become super valuable. So, we're no longer in Oakland. We're playing in Sacramento for 3 years while we're building a new ballpark. That group of people, a lot of them have moved on to other opportunities to where now they're sales leaders because they went through an environment that had a certain level of difficulty to it that made them have a unique skill set as opposed to just picking up the phone and closing a deal. Um, Sometimes I mean, the atmosphere internally, and like when there is a win, they celebrate hard. It's like, hey, like to close a big deal in an environment that was that difficult where you're relocating a franchise, like it really shows the level of effort that goes into the process and that they were committed to their process to get something like that done. And they, I mean, look, we did a decent amount of sales last year for a small team, and each of those reps are in a great spot and position for it. So yeah, jump into a situation where there's some adversity at some point in your career. It'll help define who you are and give you some challenges to try to overcome. It'll make you more valuable as an employee moving forward. I would say this though too, like the situations are all different across all of sports. Who you choose to work for is extremely important. One of the things that we were very fortunate with is that we have probably what known as one of the best sales directors in baseball. He was committed to the long term and us transitioning to Vegas and the opportunities that would open up. So the team and the talent we still had good talent that was interested in working for us because it's extremely important when you're looking and weighing opportunities to look at the sales leadership and their reputations as individuals. And Josh Feinberg, who runs our sales team, is known as one of the best in the business. So Josh, as people were looking at opportunities and we were trying to bring folks in, it was still a very competitive environment to hire and onboard a sales team because a lot of people realize that, okay, this is a little bit of a challenge to sell this, but I do have a chance to work for one of the best known leaders in baseball. So That's super helpful too when you're making your decisions is for your next step. Find a place where you're going to work with people that have great reputations.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Um, so let me ask you this. So Steve, when you're hiring, whether it was hiring for the Oakland or now even looking at whenever you're ready to ramp up your staff, let's say in Vegas, um, when you're looking at candidates, what characteristics do you look for someone that's going to be a good fit for your sales department?
That's a great question. We just hired, so we brought on legends to help us sell Las Vegas ballpark. We just hired our lead of that project, Kelsey Bannister. We hired her as the VP of sales for that project. We had a number of highly qualified applicants. Kelsey has a great reputation across the industry. She has a wonderful network that was reaching out on her behalf to advocate for her to do that role. And, you know, when you sit down with someone and you have that one shot to have that conversation, you need to be ultra prepared. So, and we had a number of candidates that were, we just felt like when we hired Kelsey and brought her on board to lead that project in Vegas, that she was not only familiar with the market, but had a really good action plan for how we were going to achieve success there. So if you do get your one shot, your one opportunity to get that interview or take that next step, they don't happen often. It's almost like we were talking, JP and I were talking about, we were at the Super Bowl. It's like, you know, it's a cool experience. You think you're going to be there every year, but we may never go back to a Super Bowl again to see the Birds play. Like, that's just how it is. When you have your one shot at getting that interview, you want to walk into that interview as prepared as you could possibly be, know as much about the product, the situation, whatever adversity there could be, the person who's interviewing you, and also make sure that you're connected with your network enough that someone is going to reach out to that person that has a personal connection to them and be an advocate for you. It's a lot of pre-work that goes into the process. It's not easy, but at the end of the day, that's who separates and that's who gets hired. If you just roll in there with some standard questions that you just Googled on what do I do in an interview and try to say like, hey, I got my education, I should be good to go. Like, um, it's not gonna go over great. And because it's just too competitive for that to happen. So that's my advice when you guys start to take the next step. And then be open to what you want to do. Like I oversee a good percentage of our business operations. I oversee our corporate partnerships team. I oversee our ticketing team. There may be something where you make that impression, but you may not be the right fit for that particular role. But if you're prepared and buttoned up, there is probably a good opportunity that if you make that right impression, I may have something that opens up in merchandise or corporate partnerships or corporate partnership activation or whatever, that I'm like, hey, you know what? This person who I interviewed for this ticketing job was outstanding. Let's just didn't get the ticketing job, but maybe let's take a second shot at an interview for this open position in another area. And so you want to leave that impression the right way. Even if you don't get the opportunity, you want to follow up with I appreciate your time with the interview. Here's why I feel like I'm qualified. Here's a couple of references that I know that are in your network that would speak highly of me. And I think those are just important follow-ups. Sports is a very, very small industry. You mess it up one time, you're screwed. So don't realize there's not well, I just interviewed with the, Charlotte Hornets. That's not going to get back to the person. Now I'm talking to someone in Florida, Panthers. It's not going to get back to them that, I wasn't prepared for my interview. You can guarantee it's going to get back to them because this is such a these are a bunch of small family run businesses. These aren't publicly owned corporations here. Everybody knows everybody. And so your job is to make sure that you insert yourself into that network and always put your best foot forward.
Yeah, and well, and for good or for bad, in Philadelphia, it's even smaller because most people that live here don't leave. So, you
Yeah,
know,
which
that's
is
the
why
other.
I've been in California for 30 years, because I can't get back there. No, it's one of the great things, especially about the Phillies, the culture that they have there. It started from way, way back when, and obviously Dave Montgomery, who's had a huge impact on the culture, and a lot of longtime people that I've worked closely with, the John Webbers of the world, Derek
Yeah.
Schusters of the world. These folks are not going anywhere, but they do it as good as anybody. And the fans of Philadelphia are fortunate to be able to go to a ballpark where it's run by professionals, that it's part of their DNA. They care, and they really leave a lasting imprint on the overall fan experience. So it's, you guys are fortunate to have that as kind of a model to see. But look, at the end of the day, like, you got to be able to get yourself into that network.
Yeah. I tell the students all the time, and I don't know if probably some of the folks in this class have heard me say this, but the Phillies do an incredible job with their internship program, and it really serves as a feeder system. So you very rarely see an open entry level position on teamwork. And that's really, you got to understand that that stems down. They want everybody to get that first initial experience in ticket services. So in ticketing, in customer service, and in many ways, thinking about sales, getting some sales experience to then let you know that, hey, you're willing to do whatever it needs to be done to give the fans the best experience. And then you maybe work in the field that you're actually looking to get into.
Yeah, I mean, and if you do break into an organization like that, like, we've hired guys that were interns at the Phillies away before. One of my favorite hires that I've ever had, Dave Nasty, who currently works for the San Francisco Giants. He went through the program at Drexel. He worked as an intern for the Phillies in sales, and he became he's a sales leader now for the San Francisco Giants. If you come through a program that's good and people understand that, hey, they're doing it the right way, you're going to have even better opportunities. I'm down here in Mesa, Arizona right now at our spring training facility. I feel like we run one of the most comprehensive programs for interns during the course of the spring that's out there. We have 20 interns here now from Arizona State and Grand Canyon University, all of them from their sports management programs, all of them from the presidents of both sports management programs down. They come here and they do their internship. All 20 of them will have full-time jobs in sports when they graduate. It's part of finding that right program, maybe stepping out of your comfort zone in order to make sure you do it. I'm talking to my son, who's your guys' age. Like, he's signed to play in the summer, but when he's done, he's gonna have a little window. I'm sending him to New York to work with CAA, just because CAA has that level of reputation, for just a month before he goes back to school. So it's like, if you associate yourself with programs or with organizations that are top tier or have top tier programs like the Phillies have, or one that we run here at Hohokam, you're going to get yourself into a position to where it's easier to get that full-time job. And frankly, we make an investment. I went down, I got here yesterday morning. We're going to be here for the spring, met every person down there, asked them about their story. We're genuinely interested in their success, because their success helps us continue to breed success as they go out into the world and they take their next step in their jobs. We have folks all over all four major sports and further in the sports that have worked in this program. They're going to be great advocates for us, and that's how it just continues to snowball.
Great. All right. Well, Steve, we got about 10 minutes. I know you're on a hard stop here, so we want to be respectful of your time again. So we got about 10 minutes. I want to open it up to some questions from you guys, Aiden, and then whoever, yeah, and Noah. Yeah, Aiden, go ahead.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for talking to us. I just was pretty interested about what the next 3 years in Sacramento is going to look like for you guys. How are you? Obviously, it's a temporary move there. How are you kind of trying to be part of that community and immerse yourself in there while also understanding that it's temporary? And what does that look like for ticket sales? I know that you're going to be playing in like a smaller ballpark, but like, what's the strategy like for that, being in a place and trying to obviously immerse yourself in the community while also knowing it's only temporary?
Yeah, that's a great question. As we were looking at next steps, knowing that our lease at the Coliseum was going to be up, Sacramento stood out to us for a couple reasons. Number one, they have a strong infrastructure and a good ballpark there. That ballpark and the Sacramento River Cats are owned by the Sacramento Kings. Kings have won NBA Franchise of the Year a couple of times. They're a very solid group of people. As we look to go into that market, even short term, we have an obligation as a team to engage the marketplace and help them achieve their overall goals and objectives. Their sales team at the River Cats and Kings is doing our day-to-day sales there. They're managing and operating the building and the experience for us. But we are giving them an opportunity to showcase the Sacramento market for future expansion. We just had the commissioner of baseball out 2 weeks ago and talking to some potential partners down there, as well as the staffs for all three organizations. And like, it is a good opportunity for Sacramento to step forward as MLB expands, and show, and really, it's great to say a bunch of numbers on paper, like what you feel like your market can do, but this will be an actual live demonstration that probably separates Sacramento from other possible expansion markets. And so I think the fans of Sacramento have understood that. They've embraced us. We sold out season tickets and at extremely high average ticket prices. And they're just been super excited to support the club. We've also realized it's time for us to start investing in the club, as we typically go through these phases. We've been to the playoffs 9 times since the year 2000. We've been one of the winningest franchises in the sport. It's hard for people to see, like, we go really high and then really low and build it back up. We're at this point now where we have a run of players on the field that I feel like our lineup will at some point be as competitive or better than most in the league, and we'll be back in the playoffs like we always are. I think that the fans in Sacramento are starting to realize that and understand, and hopefully at the end of this, either Sacramento gets themselves a expansion team, or those fans are following us to Vegas because we're building a world-class ballpark down there.
Great. Noah?
Thank you.
So obviously Sacramento, going to Sacramento and the team's direction right now, you guys are like bottom tier and all. You don't have like a Bryce Harper or Ohtani. So having players like on like a Lawrence Butler or like Brent Rooker, how important are they to a team like you guys compared to like Harper and Ohtani? They're in big markets already.
Yeah, I think we have a number of guys. You mentioned 2 of them that we're hoping to lock up long term, so we can start to grow them and build as we move into Vegas. We just signed Brent Rooker to a 5-year deal. Lawrence Butler is someone who has superstar potential. I think there's a number of other players in our everyday lineup that could fit that mold. That's the same thing that's happened to us. If you step back, we had Matt Chapman, Matt Olson, Marcus Simeon, like those were all the same players that we have at this level. They then eventually step up into that MLB All-Star superstar level in baseball. The thing for us is at that stage now, those are the folks that we want to sign them long-term instead of letting them leave due to our situation as free agents. So we feel like we have a core that's as good as any in the league. It's just a matter of now getting these guys locked up. And baseball's great, man. Like there is always this wave of young talent that comes in. Bryce Harper's amazing. It's very rare to get a Bryce Harper and Ohtani, but if you can put together a lineup that's anchored with multiple all-stars, you're likely going to put yourself in a position to win. And a team like the Braves have done a great job with that, just locking up their players long term. I think there's kind of that template there to when we bring up young talent and then have the resources eventually with the revenues from a new stadium to sign free agents. We just signed Luis Severino to throw into our pitching staff for $67 million. We're making that commitment to continue to grow on the field, and I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised. That'll trickle down to our sales team. This is the message that they have to spread and talk about every day to get people to commit to buying into the product. So you're kind of selling kind of a a little bit of a crystal ball here on how we see things playing out. But the good thing for us is we've had the credibility to where we've had this conversation now multiple times over 20 years, and it seems to always come to fruition. So this is just the next wave of players that I think are going to be exciting and fun to watch.
Thank you.
All right. Good question, Noah. Anybody else? Any other? Yeah, what you got, Kate?
So we talked about seat relocations, for like season ticket holders when changing stadiums. And I think you said that this new one is only going to be for 3 years. Is that difficult to do when you're only going somewhere for like a short period of time and then switching again?
Well, so we pretty much left our existing Oakland fan base behind and built up a new, so we didn't relocate anyone. We gave our fans in Oakland the chance to step to the front of the line to buy season tickets in Sacramento. Not a ton of them took us up on it. It's about a 90-minute drive between the two cities. There were some that were interested, and we made sure that we took care of them. The next move to Vegas, we're going to go through more of a formal process. We anticipate that's a 30,000 seat ballpark. We are going to cap season tickets at probably 15 or 16,000. So we have ability to sell single game tickets and capitalize on revenue opportunities across the 81 games. But we do think that process will be a build from scratch. And the majority of those folks will be local market, hopefully in Vegas, that'll be wanting to step forward and support their new hometown team. So it's a little harder with the relocation. Like Texas just built a new ballpark next to their old ballpark. And so everyone thinks like, hey, I want the seat that I had in the old Texas stadium to be almost identical in the new Texas stadium. And sometimes that's a little bit harder to accomplish. But when you do a franchise relocation, it really becomes it's a little bit easier of a process to do. But that's a great question. It's operationally, as you guys have some ticket ops background, it's a pain in the ass to keep building new stadiums and moving, and there's nothing easy about it. But luckily I have a great team that's, despite the challenges we're throwing at them, they're willing to take it on. And even for them on the ops side, just like sales, selling a product that's a little harder to sell gives you that little bit of an edge and a story to talk about when you're interviewing for your next opportunity. On the operations end, this is the type of stuff that they'll put as bullet points in their resume too.
Yeah, they say that everybody should open up a building once in their career in sports,
Yeah.
but only do it once.
And don't wait 30 years to do it actually either. It's
Right. Yeah, I caught it in the beginning of my career. You're catching it on the back end of your career.
Yeah, this is it for me, man. Once we open that ballpark in Vegas, it's I'm going to enjoy that as much as I can, and then
Yeah.
and that's it. I'm not going to go through this process again, even though as fun as it is. I'm
Yeah.
losing a lot of sleep lately.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got a couple more minutes here with you, Steve. I asked you already sort of what, some advice you'd have for students to stand out. Good question that always comes up. And I always sort of answer it, but I really don't have a firsthand experience. What's it like working in baseball? What do you love about baseball? You're a career baseball guy, so you obviously have to love the sport, but just in terms of a work-life balance, how do you manage that?
I've been very fortunate that I've had my wife has been super supportive of this dream of mine and that like my passion to work in baseball. That's got to be key. The people in your life have to understand that you're making a real commitment to your job. But look, when I walked through the clubhouse this morning and we're giving everybody hugs and we're starting off another season, it's like that level of teamwork and camaraderie is unmatched. You can't get my oldest son's a engineer. He's going to be like, you can't get that level of like excitement and enthusiasm for getting up and going to work every day. I don't think from being an engineer, but you can when you're part of something that you feel like is bigger. And, that's what continues to drive me, but you do need that support from your family in order to make that work. Raising two boys, I was coaching sports as much as I can, but I was also spending a lot of time on the road or in Arizona or wherever. And so to have someone there to kind of help assist, it's important. It's an important part of the process.
All right. Well, again, we thank you for taking the time out of your schedule. I know you've got some things going on, so I'm going to sort of we'll wrap this thing up. If the students want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that, Steve?
Yeah, just send me a note on LinkedIn or hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm usually pretty responsive. And then like I said, the one thing I'd said earlier is keep building your personal network up. So the interactions that you're having either with the Flyers or other teams, it's like you want to stay connected to those people as much as you can. And just, I may not always have time to just jump on a one-on-one call during certain parts of the year, but even a quick note back and forth, just checking in, how are things going? Like it's just knowing that person's in your network. And from my perspective, if you're taking that extra effort, and you're interested and you're curious, even if it's just a swapping of a note back and forth on LinkedIn, it shows it's a different level than just, hey, I hope everything works out and I get a job, fingers crossed.
Right. Great. All right. Well, thanks again, Steve. I appreciate it. We'll be in touch, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, good catching up, JP. Thanks, everybody.